Hi, everyone, and warm welcome to today's joint session between Google Sweden and Keywordio. Really nice to see you all here. My name is Sam Uda, and I work as an agency account strategist here at Google, which means that I work a lot together with Keywordio. And it's so great to see you all here, especially after 2 years almost now of online networking, online sessions. It's just great and fantastic to see you all live in real life here today. But I also know that a lot of you are joining as well online, and it's great to see that we have such a high attendance for today's important session that will cover many important topics, diving into, for example, Performance Max and a little bit of insights into Black Week, which is really important now in time, because now is the time to get prepared for Q4 and the holiday season as well, and how to make sure that you're set up correctly. But we'll be also diving into one of the most important topics, which of course is privacy, which is really important for us here at Google Sweden, but also globally, because we need to be able to make sure how are we able to ensure respecting the user's choices, but also be able to collect the data in a privacy safe way. And I know that that can be a bit tricky for many, but that's why we are here today and why we have this session together with Keywordio. So again, really warm welcome. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jonas from Keywordio.
Thanks. Thank you. Hi, nice to see everyone. And yeah, let's get started with the agenda for today. So today I will talk about the privacy related topics. Johan will then bring us through more of the details in terms of how to measure, and also share some of the latest trends we see to make sure you are covered for Q4 and Black Week. And then in the end, Oscar will take some of the deep details in terms of how to really make sure you get the maximum out of Performance Max campaigns in Google Ads. And we're really excited to share all of the content that we have created together with Google for this session today. So what we do, we are really, if you look at what we did, and I remember standing on this stage for maybe like 5 years ago, we were, as a company, Keywordio, we're really focusing on purely Google Ads. Now we have expanded that a lot, and realizing this year that data and measurement is really so important. That is also something that we, together with Google and your team, Sam, how to measure and how to make sure that you future-proof your business, it's getting so important these days. And I will also share a lot of insights why I think it will be even more important tomorrow that we do this. So really happy to see that we grow in terms of services. And we have received many questions, because many of you who are here in the audience today have put in some questions for today as well. So we have tried to include them in the topics. But like I mentioned, starting off with privacy and why that will be so much more important. Talking more about Google Analytics 4, I assume that many of you already have probably a GA4 basic setup done. You probably have some data collections, and you probably have a lot of questions in terms of, is this done right? Is it done in a privacy safe way? Have we really done the configuration right? And I'm pretty sure that many of the questions will be answered like, no, we probably need to dig in a bit more to this to make sure that we have the future-proof way of doing it. And then the Black Week, it's going to be a lot of new trends for this year for sure. Then we're going to do a mingle session here in this room for all of you who join here in person. And for you who stay a little bit longer, we're going to continue for an after work at Scandic Grand Central. So hope you guys stay for the full session. So what is it that we really see if we look at the challenges of tomorrow? And I don't think these challenges will go away. So if we look at the cost per click, typically that is rising year over year. Doesn't really matter what marketing platform you work on. That typically happens because increased competition when channels work. Typically, the cost per click it's getting increased when the competition is increasing. We also see that product margins is getting squeezed many times because like big marketplaces come into the place, and that is just pushing the margins. And of course, cost related to shipping, like all of you know, it's been a challenge for everyone who is in e-commerce for the last few years. And I know a lot of you have battled a lot with that. And then I think the third one is actually competence. We see when we, for example, send out invoice to these kind of events, there's so many people that are changing job. So if you work in a place for 3 years in a specialist role, for example, you've probably been at that company for a very long time. And of course, that's also a challenge. If you have like somebody who is managing a Google ad channel, which is probably going to be a very important revenue stream for that company, if that person changing job every second year, that's going to be a challenge as well. And of course, all of this needs to be solved on top of a privacy safe way. So how is it really that we're going to do this in the future? I mean, it needs to be consented. So if somebody visit your website, they need to opt in and share consent that, yeah, you're allowed to track my data. And of course, you as a company also need to be smarter in terms of how to use first-party data. And we actually have a next session in the end of September together with Vujado, where we will speak even more about how to use CRM data in terms of enhancing your marketing performance, for example. So first-party data will be very important, and really recommend you guys for signing up for that event in the end of September as well, together with Vujado. And then, of course, the third one is that we're not going to be able to measure everything, so we need to guess sometimes, and making sure that you model the guest conversions in a smart way, it's going to be very, very important. And of course, that is something that Google provides a lot of technology in, and that you need to use. So privacy, why is it more important than ever? How many people know Max Schrems? I see a couple of hands here, and I mean, if you look at, of course, you can read more about Max and what they have done regarding sending in, for example, the 101 complaints sent into companies in Europe. And of course, they have a lot of good things, because it comes out that companies needs to do better in terms of making sure that you measure, but you measure in a privacy first way. So what they have done is that, you should really go in and take a look at their homepage, and we're going to share all the links afterwards, so you can read up on this. But there is a lot of interesting things happening about the noise that they create with the complaints that they have sent in. And just to give you a couple of examples. So these are examples of sites in Scandinavia that have received complaints. And why have these complaints been sent in? So it's different reasons. Some of them have used universal analytics and tracking IP addresses, and the data is then transferred to US servers, for example. Some of them have used Facebook Connect and measure it in terms of personal data. So there are different reasons. And of course, you can dig into these details and see the full list, which is completely transparent, and you can find all of this information. But these are some of the sites. So Familjeliv, CDON in Finland, Coop in Sweden, and Dagens Industri. So these are just examples of sites in Scandinavia that have received these kind of complaints from the None of Your Business, which is the organization that Max Schrems use when they send in the complaints, for example. The second reason is, of course, that 1st of July next year will sunset universal analytics. And what this means is that you will not be able to collect data in your universal analytics setup. And if you work a lot with analytics, of course, you want to work with year-over-year comparison. So that means that you need to have a setup of Google Analytics 4 already implemented, that you have verified, that you trust, because you will not be able to compare universal analytics with Google Analytics data, because the data model is completely different. And we will also talk a lot more about, for example, the new attribution model and the different settings you can do on that. So that is why it's very important to make sure that you have that set up. And I actually think that Google Analytics 4 is not only a measurement talk, it's actually a lot about taking the chance when you need to redo your measurement. Why don't do it in a way where you actually make sure you also think about the privacy first approach, because you need to do it. And then the third reason, so these are pictures that I took. I went to Los Angeles earlier this year. So this is from April. And I think this is very interesting because if you look at all the big billboards from the big tech companies in LA, they are actually selling their products right now with a privacy first approach. So, I mean, that Apple push privacy first for iPhone, this is like the main USP they use to sell new iPhones. WhatsApp is talking about like it's private, right? So I think that this will drive the general public's behavior, which will push more pressure on everyone who runs a web shop or a site. So this means that I think you will have even more pressure to be able to do this in a smart and privacy first approach in the future. I haven't seen these kind of ads in Europe yet, but I definitely think that this is a trend that we will see in Europe as well pretty soon. So how do we approach this? How to do it in a privacy first way? I think that you first look at the collect phase. I mean, how do you actually collect the data? Then you should look at the mid sector here, like how do you actually measure it? And then the third thing is actually how you activate. And that's also another thing that for you who have worked with Google Analytics 4, it's much more focused on the active users compared to talking about session and bounce rate. So you actually don't really have that type of a measurement. And for example, bounce rate was not even accessible in the earlier releases of GA4, and it's calculated in a completely different way. So focus more on who is on your site, who is actually active, and how can we get more of that, instead of talking about sessions and bounce rate, for example. So it is a big shift in mindset as well. And every one of you will get the slides afterwards, so you can get all the details down here as well. But I think collect, measure. Just recently, this is an August update for this year, that they have actually sent in complaints about how cookie banners are written. So I think they have sent in like 226 complaints about how to actually write cookie banners. And this is a screen from example from Klarna in, I think it was beginning of June this year. And is this really the way to do it in a transparent way? Most of the time, you actually need to move over to something like this if you're going to be 100% compliant. So more really show that it's accept or reject all, and then you can customize. And of course, the how to actually work with this is to, of course, you want to have as much data as possible as a marketeer, but you also needs to be transparent, and it should be easy to access as well. So thinking about this, and you can also work, of course, more with like A/B tests in terms of how to get people to actually opt in. Like, why should I share my data? And yeah, working more towards something like this is where I think we are heading, to be transparent and also easy to accept or reject, and also be able to customize. So we're not going to go into all of the list in terms of hows and templates on these types of topic, but if you want to, then we have put together a blog post that is, the purpose of this is actually to collect more of the links and the real sources behind this. So if you want to look at all the 101 complaints set in, for example, or finding privacy policy templates from the EU Commission, for example, then you can go in here, and we have linked them on this blog post. So this is a good source for you to actually dig into more of the details on this. And of course, I like podcasts, so I also think that there's a lot of good podcasts to listen on here. And For example, Life After GDPR is one that I really recommend, where they do a lot of good interviews on this topic as well. So taking the opportunity on the way to work to get some of the latest, it's a good source for information for sure. So how do you actually take the next step? We realized that many of our customers asked about this. So we put together a survey that works with the framework Collect, Measure, and Activate. And based on these questions, we have put together 3 different packages. So one package is a completely self-service package that you do on your own. And we have a review from us afterwards to get some input. The second one is that we actually have a workshop more in detail to actually help you what steps you should do. Maybe have the discussion with the legal team or the data compliance team, for example. And then the third team is where we actually do the full audit for you and actually work with the legal team to make sure it's actually customized and also configured for your basic needs. So 3 types of packages to actually make sure that you have done this correctly and that you use the latest setup. So that is what we have packaged separate for this topic. So the self-service plus the workshop, and then the full assessment plus the implementation plan of it. So one of the questions that we received before is that, for example, do you track IP addresses in a typical Google Analytics 4 setup? And the answer is no on that. And that is also something that, okay, why is that important? Of course, IP addresses is seen as personal information. So that's why it's very important to be really in the detail in terms how you treat that. The second thing, like I mentioned about what Max Schrems has done, is that really, are you sending that data? Because in the past, if you had a universal analytics setup, and that you tracked, and you also tracked IP addresses, which ends up in servers in the US, for example. So that is something that is not compliant, and that is why this is very important. So the second question is like, how can I set up Google Analytics 4 so I can guarantee that no data is transferred and only stored in the EU? So that is a more complex question and requires more of the setup, because it's not only to say GA4 will solve everything for me, but you need to know how you set it up and how to do it. And the answer for that is then you need to have a server-side tagging setup. You need to have your own cloud in EU, and you need to make sure that that is customized for it. So that is not like a default setup to guarantee that you only store data that way. So that needs to have a deep understanding, both in terms of the legal aspect, how it's done, and also the technical aspect, how to set up, for example, the server-side tagging and connect that to Google Analytics 4. So these are some of the questions that we have received before on this topic. So if we look more into Google Analytics 4, and I think that one of the most common answers that we receive is that companies say that, yeah, but we have set it up. And then when we open up Google Analytics 4, we see that, yeah, it's there. Maybe it's tracking users, but it typically doesn't track revenue. Or if we break down the revenue, if we look at like average order value, or actually what products do you actually have in the cart, for example, when you check out, that data is not there. So it's not configured in a way that you actually need it to be. And then, of course, you will have challenges when you need to do more of the detailed analysis. So that is something we see a lot, that it's easy just to put up a default setup, but if you don't have it correctly set up, you will have challenges for the future. And of course, you want to find those errors as fast as possible, because that data will be very important. And even right now, you will not be able to do year-over-year comparison if you haven't done this already, because you cannot compare the old data with the new in Google Analytics 4. So for the ones who have the more complex setup, maybe you have an app as well that requires also more part, or if you use even more offline interactions, for example. And then you have the second part where you have the actual analytics interface. And then, of course, the third part, which is something that is great for the more complex users with the data export and making that more seamless, and get data into, for example, BigQuery to combine that with other sources. To have this set up, it's something that you will be able to use a lot more. And of course, in the end, it's all about how to understand who is my most valuable customer, how can I make sure that they are more activated on my site, and how can I take this to the next step. And like I said, no IP addresses, for example. The data model is completely new. I mean, in Universal Analytics, you have last click. In GA4, the default is actually data-driven from the start. And you can even go in and configure the look back window. So for example, how long time you should actually go in and look back. And you can change the attribution model as well if you don't prefer to have that. But of course, just by changing the attribution model, you will have completely different results based on that. So that's also very important to be aware of. Some of the most interesting things that we see, and the challenge is really the disconnect between sales and the revenue budget. Of course, that needs to be connected to the marketing or the P&L, for example, but it also needs to be connected to a traffic budget. And being able to have all of those connected together, because like saying, hey, we're going to grow 100% this year, and not connecting that to the marketing spend, or not combining it with how much traffic do we actually need to hit this target, is something we see quite a lot, that people don't do the work to actually connect these three together. So, and this is something, of course, this is not something Google Analytics solves for you, but this is something you need to think about, how to actually build this and make sure that you have a connection between this. The second thing is that we see a lot of misunderstanding in distribution. So for example, let's say that we talk about what's the conversion rate, for example. And of course, if you look at a very detailed breakdown on conversion rate on a site, you will have a very scattered picture of that. So you need to do more of a, okay, what's the normal distribution? What is actually expected variation for conversion rate? And doing that, you will find, for example, these points here, 3.2% or 2.8%. So 2.8% is actually a normal value. That is not like, hey, we did a great job. This is great. It's just within the normal distribution of the conversion rate. But if you're hitting 3.2, you have done something that probably is really, really good. And then you need to understand that in detail. So this is something you will have help in Google Analytics 4 to spot points and measure and marks that are actually outside the normal distribution and expected. Because there, it's very interesting to understand. Of course, it's great when this happens, when you have like a lot higher. Like, is it due to a new product launch? Is it due to a new price point, or is it a campaign, or is it a new traffic source that we really nailed, which could be the reason for a really high conversion rate. So identifying when you really are outside these normal distributions. And of course, it's the same for pretty much all of the metrics. If you're looking at cost per click, of course, that's also varies a lot over the year. So being aware of this is very important. And then the third thing is the attribution. I mean, what channel has the highest contribution or the most important contribution? So when you're looking into your channel report in Google Analytics or Universal that you have done in the past, remember that when you open up Google Analytics 4, you're going to have a different attribution model to start with. So don't go in and expect to have the same data. Don't go in and expect that you will have data for GA4 that you should try to compare with Universal Analytics. Go in and try to verify the data compared to what you know is true. So look at the real sales for that time of period, compare it, and look at what is it actually that we are measuring. Are we managing to track number of transactions accordingly? Are we tracking the right type of revenue? So you look at the total numbers and make sure that they are correct. Then when you have done that and really verified and can really trust the data, then you can talk about more detailed breakdown. But don't try to compare it to the old setup and what you're used to look at, because it will be different for sure. And of course, also a lot of things have changed, right? And we will talk more about how to, for example, identify the effect of traffic from Safari, for example, which is, of course, Safari is with new releases all the time. It's getting more and more hard to actually identify where the traffic is coming from, for example. So, of course, if you're within plus minus 5%, you are in a green space. You have good compliance with a real number of transactions, for example. If you're like plus ways. So make sure that you compare it to the real world and not trying to build GA4 compared to universal analytics. Consent mode, like we talked about in the beginning, how to collect with the consent banner, with the cookie banner. Of course, making sure that you have done this in a correct way and that no data is collected before anyone has opted in for it. So understanding how the consent modes works and make sure that it's set up according to how your business is run is very important. So how many in here have actually are using like Google Analytics 4 like on a weekly basis? A couple of hands. Like once a month? Then, I mean, some of you have seen the interface, and I guess that then you have also seen that you are missing things, right? And you don't really find the data that you want to see in there, right? And I think that is probably one of the feedback that we get a lot, that we cannot find this, or we're looking for this metric. So I'm going to show you a couple of parts that are very important to know how to use in the interface, because you will be able to get a lot of the data, but of course you need to know how to actually customize it. So you have on the left-hand side, you have a complete different tab, what is called the Exploration Hub. And the Exploration Hub, when you start using Google Analytics 4, I really recommend you to actually do a couple of sessions just on that, so you get comfortable with actually pulling the data yourself if you don't find it. So this is a free form table, and let me bring you through some of the questions. So let's say that I want to understand how users come from different channels and look at how different browsers present that, for example. So then you can, on the left side, you see that the box dimension, this is where you read in the data. So here you read in the dimension that you want to look into. Then on the second column, there you add what data you want to present in this free form table. So in this case, I want to show columns with different browsers, for example. And on the rows, I have just selected that I want to see the different channels, and the metric I am looking at here is active users. So what is interesting here is that then I can go in and look at, for example, here, I see that Safari, and I see that the numbers of active users, but I also see from Safari, it seems like there's actually 5,000 active users that seems to coming from a source that is non-specified, for example. And if I just assume that all browsers are the same, which of course they will not be, but if you look here in the matrix, you will actually see that some browsers, it seems that we are actually picking up not that many non-defined users. So this is something that is valuable for you to actually see and understand traffic. And for example, I get a lot of questions about what is Safari in-app, for example. Safari in-app is if you have an app, for example, let's say LinkedIn, and you click and it opens up not in the regular feed, that is called an in-app view, for example. So being able to do these kind of analysis and play around with the exploration hub, it's very important, because here you can pull all the data that you need, I would say. Just doing this, for example, just changing, if you would be an e-com, not looking at active users, but just changing from active users to transactions. It seems like here, even in this case, we have actually 246 transactions that comes from a non-defined channel. So it seems that maybe that probably in reality comes from something else. I mean, being able to look into this is often very important, and specifically when we talk about privacy, to compare different browsers, for example, and see how they perform. And with new releases coming out all the time, I mean, when they get adopted, it's interesting to do this kind of analysis over those 2 weeks or 3 weeks when for example, Apple is pushing a new version of iOS, for example, and Safari gets updated. The second thing in Exploration Hub is the segment part. And here it also comes in many of the new features with machine learning that you have accessible. So that's also one reason to actually make sure that you set up GA4 early, make sure that you start filling up those audience and segments, because being able to have second one is funnels, and also here, if you I have used the segment part, and you have seen that I have listed, for example, people who have purchased, and compare the funnel for purchaser and compare with people who have not purchased, for example. So the blue one here, those are purchaser, and the pink funnel is the one who hasn't purchased. So I think also not just looking at funnels from all the users, but actually do different segments is a really powerful tool. And of course, you can build your own segments, and you can use a lot of different ways. And also setting them up, like in this case, we look at the funnel from that somebody have scrolled, they have viewed an item, add to cart, and then begin the checkout and then purchase. So this is also a good tool for many to set this up and share this with within the teams. How many have used the cohort analysis? One, great. And I think the cohort analysis is typically something that many are maybe a bit afraid of, because when you first generate it, it just throws a lot of data at you, and then you get like, shit, what is this? I mean, cohort is just a way to actually, let's say we look at conversion rate, and then you look at conversion rate over time. But then you realize that the conversion rate is, of course, it's changing, like we talked about. But let's say that let's bring out a weekly segment of users and then compare that. So that is one cohort, for example, people who have come into the site during this week, for example. And in this case, that I would like to look at active users who have put something into the cart. And then I want to use the different audience. So once again, I want to compare how people who have purchased compared to people who hasn't purchased. And why I think this is interesting is that then you can see the actual difference over the weeks. So here we can see that, for example, from the 31st of July to the 6th of August, we have 93% of the ones who made a purchase. They put something in the cart the first week. So this is probably a company that actually have quite short in terms of the buying behavior. So typically people buy within a week here. But then you can ask yourself, like, why was it low during this week, for example? Or what can we do to do it better? And then when you compare that to the pink one, which is the one who hasn't purchased, still you see that, of course, if you haven't purchased, you probably hasn't put that many things in the cart, because we see here that on average, the first week, people maybe only have put around 10% of the people have put something in the cart. But there was something that happened during the 24th of July to the 30th of July, where actually was a lot more people putting things into the cart. So not trying to optimize for like conversion rate, but actually trying to look a bit higher up in the funnel and see, can we get more people to put things in the cart, and then do tests on that. And I think when we have done this, I think it always creates a lot of interesting discussions. And once again, it's about actually thinking about how can we get more people to take active measurements on our site, and how can we activate more users. So that's why I think the cohort analysis is valuable. And of course, it's something that you can completely customize for what is important for your business, what problems you're trying to solve right now. So I think definitely worth playing around with the cohort analysis as well, and working with the segments at the same time. So this is another just screen from Google Analytics 4. You will have it in the settings, and then you can go into the attribution settings that you have. Here you can customize the attribution model, and you can even go in and look at the different look back windows and the settings for this. So I mean, I don't say go in and change it, but definitely be aware of that you have a new attribution model. So don't expect the data to be the same, because it's not. And with the audience as well, like you saw with the exploration hub, audience is something that is very valuable and you can use a lot. And of course, depending on the amount of traffic you have, you probably need to build up those audience. So I mean, making sure to set the most important one up, so you fill them up and then you can use them. And specifically for what Oscar and Johan are going to talk about later, about how to prepare for Black Week, make sure you have your most important audience lists set up so you can use them. Because if it's only 1 week before, then it's going to be a challenge. And here are the automated insights, where you also see anomalies popping up. So where for example, well, it seems like conversion rate is actually even higher than predicted. That is also really good to be able to spot some of those there. And I would also like to mention that the connectors, it's also something that continuously release new ones. But of course, if you run a lot of ads, make sure that Google Ads is connected for the one who we are in the SEO part. I'm more in Search Console, being able to do more of the assortment analysis for ecom, Merchant Center. It's important that you get that, because the more data you have in analytics, the more data you can actually use in the exploration hub. So make sure that you check the boxes on those key insights and the integrations there. And I don't know how many actually use Data Studio if you present it separately. Just be aware that what data you have access to in the exploration hub, it's going to be the integration to Data Studio. You will not be able to pull all the data that you have in there. So just be aware that you probably don't have all the data that you have. And the Search Console, like I mentioned. But you also have some more data imports that can be done. And I would say this is definitely one of the more advanced features, and it definitely requires more of the customization. So for example, if you have a loyalty program, for example, it might be that you want to actually upload that data into analytics, for example. So make sure that I mean, think about what is really important for your business, and then think about how you can integrate that into the interface. Because if you get that into the exploration hub, then you can use that a lot in the work. So check that out, and Yeah, I think that is the it from my side. And then Johan, welcome up on stage.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, we'll talk about more like server-side tagging and the conversion that Google have enhanced, and also a bit of Black Friday. So let's start off with server-side tagging. So have you ever, all you guys, implemented server-side tagging yet, or how many of you tried it at least? So many. But the benefit with server-side tagging is you basically install one tag on your website, and that tag is then sending data to a server that is secure. And then you can filter out what data you want to use for your advertising or for Google Analytics and that purposes. So it's a very good and secure way to set it up. And instead of, like, for example, the client side, you're installing, for example, Google Tag Manager, and you need to set up all the conversions that's happening on your website. The server side one will be a lot more beneficial, especially with the privacy. So we usually recommend that you start moving over to the server-side tagging, even though it takes a little bit more, I say, behind the scene works and a little bit more time to set up. Like a Google side tag manager can be pretty quickly to set up, and that is recently why most people are moving over to the server-side tagging, even if you're using other platforms in your marketing mix that will benefit from it as well. So the client-side tagging is, basically you install Google Tag Manager on your website, you set up all the clicks, the buttons that you would like to track, and then send the data to the platform that you desire. So, like, for example, Google Ads or Google Analytics. And has everyone set up like Google Tag Manager, at least on the websites, or know what it is? Good. And then when you want to activate, for example, server-side tagging, so with enhanced conversion that Google uses, you will benefit of like finding conversions that you didn't find before, and it can also help you like implement better optimization on your ads, and also overall like help your advertising become easier on the platform. So as I mentioned before, we recommend the server-side tagging, but of course you can use the Google Tag Manager, but the result won't be as good. And then they also have the Google Ads API. So that exists in Google Ads. So you basically set up when you set up a new conversions within a Google Ads or the account. And then we go over to Black Week. And how many here have started prepping for Black Week yet, or is it still in the process of time? Okay, it's a few. So we usually talk about the funnel for Black Week. So it's a lot of preparation that's going into it. And we, of course, want to use or target our current customers and current users. But then we want growth. So we also want to focus on new customers, so strangers, people who don't know who our business is. And there are a few different ways how we can take people from strangers to visitors to leads and then customers, and then later on, of course, promoters, of like big fans of your customers. So the strangers, you can use a few different tools. So of course, SEO is a great tool. Google Ads is another one. Paid social another one, and also YouTube ads is a good one. So find new people. So try to use all of them in your marketing mix to maximize the result of your advertising. And then when you have attracted people to your website, or people watch the YouTube ads or the YouTube videos, you can retarget them with like new offers. They can offer them like pre-ordering, or like the remarketing, or like if I added something to cart, or just if I viewed a specific product, I can tailor my retargeting ads just towards them. And then when coming further down in front, like people added to cart and view products multiple times, it's very important that we have like abandoned cart ads on like Performance Max, for example. And then also, like if you use an email provider, like for example, as Jonas mentioned earlier, later this month we have a webinar with Viado. They can help you retarget people with abandoned emails, and that can help your we call it revenue go up as well. And then of course you need to segment each products of the retargeting. And then you also want to use the dynamic retargeting. So it's basically, if I add this shirt and I don't buy it, use this ad or will be displayed for me. Then we go about to the build up. So this is like what I talked about, the long-term plan for Black Friday. So already now people are start doing the research of what they are going to buy for the holidays, whether it's Black Friday or it's Christmas. They're still doing the research. So I think, for example, like a TV is a great example. So if I would like to buy a TV and I was like, yeah, I've maybe moved into a new apartment or house, and then I see, okay, this TV is like 15,000 kronor at the moment. Then I'm like, if I wait maybe until Black Friday, it might be half off. So it's like 7,500 kronor. So I already start doing my research. I go into the different websites. So it's good to be there on like Google Ads in the beginning. And then in about a couple of weeks times, I would say, in the late of September, it's great to have really good content in your like Performance Max campaigns. So example, you can have the YouTube ads to build trust and inspiration of your products, depending on the industry you're in. And then you keep working that until in the beginning of November. Then you need to start adjusting the bids, but Oscar will talk a little bit more about that. And that's prior to the holiday shopping, so before Black Friday starts, and that will go on until around Christmas, and then you need to adjust the bids a little bit again. But yeah, Oscar will talk a little bit more about that. And then, of course, you need to advertise to the stores if you have stores as a business. So just around the time of Christmas, it's if you go outside to Enco or the big businesses here, they're packed with people. So if you can't be found on Google, like in the Google Maps, that's also a big key to be found. So just a couple of important dates that you need to mark in your calendar. So as you can see, like the orange one is Black Friday. So just make sure you have like those dates like planned out, that this is when it's going to peak. I usually do the shopping, and you can start ramping up a little bit before that. So it's important to have marked this in the calendar already now if you haven't. And lastly, of the search behaviors for Black Friday. So if you go back a couple of years, like 2017, there was barely any searches for Black Week. And you can see like 2019, it's starting ramping up a little bit. And 2020, it was, quite a few, like double as much. And it peaked 2020. And actually last year dipped a little bit. So it might be a reason that people are smarter in the search behavior. So before they could use Google like Black Friday or Black Week, and you will be quite competitive when you found it. But now they might Google exactly the products they need because they already assume it's on Black Friday sales. So it's really important that you adjust your bids in that sense. And that's all for me. So heading over to Oscar here of Performance Max.
Thanks for the introduction, Johan. And yes, here to talk about Performance Max. And my guess is that most of you, or at least have heard about it. But it is, a semi-new campaign type in Google Ads. And to describe it in short, it's one campaign where you can have many like the old campaigns in it. So it's a lot easier to use and a lot easier to optimize. So this means that you have, for example, video campaigns, shopping campaign, search campaign, local campaign in the same campaign. So basically much easier. We have identified 3 different pillars that is going to decide if you're going to reach success or not with PMax. And those are, one of them is to nail the bidding. The other one is to use really good creatives. And the last thing is to have a really good feed that you want to optimize. So best practice for titles. Just like Johan said, with what we saw on the timeline is that we think that people are more mature now in how they search. This means that people are no longer searching for, or that happens as well, but people are no longer searching for shoes, for example. They are now searching for Under Armour shoes, size 41, for example. Based on that, it is super important that you use all of the attributes that are available in the feed when running shopping and then PMax. So what is the best practice for titles, and what do we recommend? We recommend to use or to avoid duplicate titles in the feed. That means that if you are, for example, using this shoe, make sure that it's unique. So make sure that you point the traffic to that particular product. We also would recommend to avoid the vague titles. This means that we need to use as much, we need to describe the products as much in detail as we possibly can. We also want to include relevant attributes, such as color, material, size, which will improve quality and also increase the likelihood of showing those products for relevant searches. And then, as you can see on the PS, including attributes in titles did not replace the need for attributes in the feed. So it's really important that you do both in order to reach the best success with PMax. Here are another examples of how we want to structure product titles, and we actually did these with different categories. So you can try to find your own category, and then you can get the inspiration of how you want to do it here on the right side. But like we said before, we will also send this material out so you can look at it later. But with the competitive landscape that we see on Google Ads, and we see that, for example, competition is growing a lot, CPCs are going up, margins are maybe getting worse. So based on that, super important that we give Google the best possible conditions to reach the best possible search for your products. Here are how the feeds and campaigns are interrelated. So in the feed, we can use these 6 different attributes to determine what product that should go into which campaign. So those are Google product category, it is brand, it's item ID, it's product type, it's condition, and custom labels. I am a super big fan of custom labels, so that is what I would recommend you to use as well. And here is why. Custom labels are an optional attribute, so you can use it if you want, and this attribute will not show in the feed or in the results. So this is just something that you will see, but the consumers will not see it. They allow you to set up, bid and analyze the PMax campaigns according to your own business objectives. So we will show you examples here. For example, custom label 0. We can define the products based on margin, for example. If you have certain products with lower margins and certain products with higher margins, you might not want to have them all in the same campaign because you need to get a different return on those 2 different types. We can also use a lifetime value label, for example. We know that the likelihood of people buying product X is bigger, that they're going to come back rather than people buying product Y. Then we want to set a higher bid for product X. So then we can filter out those in that with that label. We have also promotions and bestsellers. We also have volume and conversions, and then we have seasonal and events. And there are 5 different custom labels possible that you can use, that goes from 0 to 4. And like I said before, consumers will not see those, so it's up to you on how you call them and how you want to structure them. In PMax, we believe that creatives are more important than ever before, actually, in Google. So you could almost look at PMax as sort of a social campaign as well, or like higher up in the funnel, like Johan talked about before. And this means that it's really important to nail the creatives, and also to use different creatives for different products, for example, and for different holidays, different periods, depending on what you want to sell and what you want to show. When Friday offering. This means that in that asset group, you have the possibility to create, for example, Black Week videos in there, or Black Week images, and so on. So what we also recommend is that you test those before you, so you test those in a separate asset group before adding them all to the existing one, just so we make sure that we don't ruin everything or anything that is already working out really well. Here is also an important thing, and that is that when you're uploading new images, it can take up to 24 to 48 hours to go through the approval process. So just remember that when you add images to the asset group, that you do it on the right time. We would also recommend to try out images now, for example, in September, before Black Week and before the holiday peak, just so you know already what is going to work and what is not going to work. So you can take learnings now that you then can use on Black Week. Here is a very zoomed in timeline, but how we like to do bidding on these holiday periods is that you can see that we first have a standard baseline. I know that a couple of different companies has tried throughout the years to lower the bids before a big seasonal event in order to be more efficient and to reach a higher ROAS. We have actually seen that it's better to keep the standard bids because people are researching a lot longer before the big seasonal peak comes. So it's really important to be shown on those searches, so we know that that we capture that traffic, so that they can come back on Black Week and then make their purchase. But what we want to do is that when the big peak comes, we want to have really higher bids, so we make sure that we show. And then also super important that after the big peak, we lower the bids. And then as you can see, we lower them so they are even lower than what the standard period is. And then we keep those for about a week, and then we go back again to the standard bidding. And also on the topic of bidding, here are two different scenarios. One of them with the impression share of 60% and revenue of 100%, or sorry, 100,000, and a cost of 10,000. That gives us a ROAS of 10 and a result of 90,000. In the second example, we have impression share of 90%. We have revenue of 150,000. We have a cost of 21,429, and that gives us a ROAS of 7. But the result is actually 128,571. So that shows that if we just look at ROAS, then a lot of people go for A, but we can actually see that the result is high with B. So a recommendation here is to test out these things. Try to aim for ROAS of 7, try to aim for ROAS of 10, and see what works the best for you. It's all about testing all the time. So here we can actually see 43% increase on the result. So that would be the big recommendation, to just keep testing all the time. And then also during Black Week, what we usually do is that we look at the Monday now, for example, what did work on that day, what can we optimize towards the next day. And then we look at Tuesday when we have that data, and then we look at Wednesday. So we can do things every day, basically, based on last day's result. And that was it. So we will do a Q&A out there, right? Yeah. Okay. So do you have any questions? Yes. How do you know which one to choose? Seems to be a lot.
even though it sounds easier,
Yeah.
still figure out like what channel, like time.
Mm-hmm.
That might also time use. So think about.
Yeah. So I will let Johan answer the.
Repeat the question as well for slide. No, but can you repeat it because you?
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah. No. Sorry. So if I understand your question correctly, is to how to know what creatives to use in what channel. So I would say in terms of the PMax, there are guidelines on, for example, images that you should use, and then also you have the videos. And then I would say it's all about testing. And what do you expect from that campaign that you are creating? If the goal is to just build brand awareness, you should look for metrics such as CPM maybe and impressions. And if you look to drive profitability or growth in terms of revenue, then I would look at conversions. But I'd say it's all about testing. And also, I would probably run the test based on your budget, but maybe for a month, 2 weeks compared to other 2 weeks. That is how I would do in Google Ads, at least.
Yeah, I can also say like when it comes to the testing. So yeah, it will be quite like maybe not expensive, but you need to create a lot more assets than you have done before, because you need to test like more frequently than you have done before, because people might not like it. People might have seen it too many times. So it's very important to find out what people like, and depending on where in the funnel they are. So if they're like prospects or like people who are not aware of the customers, you might need to find different age groups or something. So one asset that are more likely to be converting of a younger age group might not be the case for older or different countries. So I think you need to create more content, and then you need to, based on the results, you can find out what's working and what's not working for you. So.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So I will repeat that and let me know if I misunderstood it. But you're saying that if you're using an ad or if you want to use an ad in during Black Friday that has, for example, a code or the graphic that says Black Week 20% off, whatever. How do we test that in advance? Yeah. So I'd say that if you have that graphics, you can't really test it out before. But if you have more generic copy, you can try to use that. So just like you said yourself, you can try to use the same material, the same background, basically, but with another text. Or you can maybe try to do a flash sale, for example, and then you can try 2 different banner ads, for example, and then see whatever of those 2 worked the better. And then you take those learnings into Black Week.
So that you can instruct the where find out where the content that created people choose to us. And it's better reactive when you try to use the thing code. So it goes to
Yeah,
Do you
so
want to repeat the question first and then take it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
basically, if I understood right, like you want to test different user-generated content versus normal content you create in a studio. And yeah, it's a great question. And for more top of funnel, the user-generated is really good for brand awareness. It might not always work as good for the conversion, but it's again up to the brands to see if it's working or not. But what you can do in the studio is you can test different colors. So let's say you have a pair of shoes and you have it in 5 different colors. You can test the different colors against each other because they still goes to same landing page. So if you taste the different colors, so what we have seen work for some clients might not work for other, but for example, colorful clothes and shoes, for example, tend to grab more attention when you see it in a feed or a YouTube ad, for example, than quite plain that's more popular in Sweden. Even though people see the more colorful and bright, they're probably not going to buy it, but that's what catches their eye and go to the site and possibly buy it. Awesome.
Yes, I have one question. When it comes to that, so what kind of information can I get from that? I've seen nothing. I'm like, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, so a good question. So the question was, what information can I see in Google Analytics regarding the PMax campaign? And are you in Universal Analytics or both? Okay, maybe Jonas, you are actually better to answer in GA4. Yes. But do you look at the results in Google Ads as well, or are you only interested in analytics? Yeah, all right. So on the old version, at least, you can see the standard metrics such as location and gender and age and so on. But in GA4, I'm actually not sure, to be brutally honest.
We have actually been our developers has been working actually quite a lot on the Google Ads API because they just released one of the latest versions, and it was not until the latest version we were actually able to pull some of the data that we have. So it's been a struggle, and I don't have the latest, but I would really recommend you to actually look into Google Ads actually when you really want to understand the details for the PMax, because it is really limited, and you will only find sort of top level.
Not right now, unfortunately. But I've heard, and maybe this is a question for the Google reps later, but I've heard rumors that it might come in the near future, but we'll have to see. But based on experiments that we have done, at least, is that shopping or smart shopping still stands for, I want to say, like 80-90% of the results. So that is definitely the biggest contributor to those campaigns. Yes. So if you have a Google account manager, you can ask them to add that as a negative keyword on that campaign, but it's not possible to do it in the interface right now.
And I would actually recommend, because you can pull a lot of assortment insights still from the PMax that in the customized report in Google Ads. So I think that is also very useful as well. So not only see it as like one chunk, but actually being able to get some assortment insights from it as well in Google Ads. So yeah.
And you can also see, like, not in Google Ads, but if you use other tools like Funnel, for example, you can pull out a lot more data that you can see as well, that you can be a bit more difficult to find in Google Ads.
Yeah, or
Yeah, exactly. Nice.
More questions?
All right.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. And we also have, as we mentioned earlier, we have another privacy webinar with Funnel, which is an email marketing system, kind of CRM, and that can help you enhance your performance on different platforms with the right tool, I guess, and do it the right way when it comes to privacy. So yeah, if you're free later this month, please let us know. And yeah, we can comment that one as well.
And like I said, first-party data is something that everyone talks about, but really how to use it and how to make sure it's uploaded into different marketing channels and building audience based on it. That's what we will talk more about on that.
Yeah. And yeah, and as we said before, you will get a presentation sent to you via email. But if you want to get it today already or right now, you can just scan the QR code with your phone and you can access the presentation right away. Awesome.